Welcome back to another episode of the Packers'at podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Maggie Loney, joined as always by Perri Goldstein, talking about a week 3 victory. The Green Bay Packers beat the New Orleans Saints 18-17 in a nail biter. And your hosts were in attendance. Perri Goldstein, do you still have jet lag? How are you feeling after an incredibly crazy weekend?
It was the best kind of crazy weekend. I am not jet lag, for it is only an hour's difference. However, I am quite tired from sitting in the Milwaukee airport for about 4 hours. But I did make it home, so that is all that matters. And it was a victory Monday. So at least they didn't lose. And because, like, for 3 quarters, I thought I flew all the way up to Wisconsin just to not even get to see them score a touchdown. But they pulled it out. Somehow.
Yeah, they absolutely did. So let's dive right in. I mean, we have a really short week. We got a quick turnaround on Thursday night. I think initially we were all hanging out pregame, saw the reports that Jair was out, Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, and it felt a little bleak. Like, that's not the supporting cast that you want for a young quarterback making his debut at Lambeau Field. And for 3 quarters, it really seemed like those were pieces that were missing. But the Packers pulled it off. So let's talk about some impressions from the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely probably one of the more inconsistent days that we've seen. I know PFF and a few other stats only attributed like 4 drops on the season or something to Packers receivers. I felt like there were 4 drops in this game.
In the half.
Yeah, in a half. Like, they kept shooting themselves in the foot. There were a ton of penalties. I felt like every time, at least in the first half, every time they would get some kind of forward progress, they'd make it to midfield or they'd make it to like in the 40s of the Saints territory, something would happen. And not that the Saints would do anything to the Packers. The Packers would do something to the Packers and they would get backed up out of field goal range. So it was an incredibly frustrating first half to watch. The run game never really got going, except for the one amazing, fun 11-yarder from Keyshawn Nixon on offense. Would love to see that more, but just like a lot of ups and downs. Obviously, Jordan Love was only 50% completion percentage on the day, 22 of 44, which is not what you love to see. I think that completion percentage is a little bit of a skewed stat. It's kind of like QB wins. It's like there's a lot that goes into that has nothing to do with the quarterback. But the offense also had some really lovely moments. And I think in the end, it was Jordan Love and the offense resiliency that won them this game. Now we'll talk about the defense, and, they did an amazing job holding the Saints to only 10 points and giving the Packers offense the opportunity to go and win this. But it was kind of Jordan Love throwing the team on his back in the fourth quarter and just saying, we're not walking out of here without a win. So a lot of things on tape that I'm sure they're going to want to discuss. And I think you and I can look at I have a few plays in mind that Jordan definitely is going to be like, I want that ball back. Right. The deep ball to Luke Musgrave, the 4th and 2 to Patrick Taylor being top 2. So the one thing I have, and I would love your thoughts on this too, is inconsistencies fine, completion percentage fine. None of it super worries me. The run game worries me. We're going to get Aaron Jones back, but like that doesn't change the fact that they couldn't get anything going on the ground. And this has now been kind of 3 weeks in a row where if Aaron Jones isn't playing, there literally is no run game. So that's the only thing that I'm like, against the Lions, we better see some more yards on the ground.
Yeah. Shout out to our friend Dusty Evely, who joined us for the game. It was great to watch with him and get his thoughts live. But one of the things that we talked about while we were like in the stands was this idea that, we said that there would be growing pains on offense. What of this offensive performance do you attribute to growing pains, and what are, what's attributed to Jordan Love not having his entire left side of his line and
Right.
2 of his best playmakers? So that's kind of a really interesting conversation too, because we haven't yet seen this Packers offense at what is supposed to be full strength. We might see that on Thursday. We'll talk about it when we do our Lions preview, but getting glimpses. And it's been fun, right, to see like Dontavian Wicks has had a couple really good weeks strung together. Romeo Doubs looks like he could be a wide receiver 1. Luke Musgrave obviously getting a ton of opportunities. Jaden Reed. So there's a lot of fun things to like on this offense, but absolutely, it's kind of hard to tell like Is it the rookie growing pains and like the missed connections, guys not being on the same
Yeah.
page? Or, is there more to it? The run game, though, absolutely a problem. And I think, you look at, I was thinking about this. A.J. Dillon's stats, 11 attempts for 33 yards, 3-yard average. But if you take away the 114-yarder that he had, that means that he ran 10 times for 19 yards. That's a 1.9-yard average outside of the 114-yarder. That
great.
That can't happen. You just can't do that. And Andy Herman, a bunch of guys broke down, videos of it, even live, like at the stadium. You could see where the hole was, and I don't know if it's a vision issue or, if things are closing too quickly, because he's not a speed back, right? There's some holes he's not going to hit like Aaron Jones can, but it's a concern. It's a big concern.
There were a few, and if like you and I can see them with our naked eye from the stands,
from
being
row
like,
45,
right, from row 45, like that, you should be able to hit that hole when you're on the ground. I'm so glad you brought up the kind of the balance between, is this injuries versus growing pains? And I do want to say, I think that there are certain moments where, Samori Toure had a few drops. You get a Malik Heath who hasn't been able to like get a catch in this game at least. And you just know when Christian Watson is fully healthy, when Aaron Jones is back, like those guys are just not going to be on the field as much. And so you like to think that like you're replacing that non-production with higher production from their starting players. So I think there's a lot to look forward to in this offense. But it is, Jordan, it stands out to me, and it stood out a lot. I don't know how people felt watching it on the broadcast, but certainly live, he keeps going back to those guys. This is not like, okay, Samori Toure, you messed up, I'm done throwing to you, right? Even the final game-winning touchdown to Romeo Doubs, that was a back shoulder fade that Love had not hit on all game. He'd been trying to get to the back pylon all game, and he kept testing it, kept testing it, kept testing it. And even to Romeo Doubs, who hadn't come down with it yet. And then finally, they hit on it and they end up winning the game. So it's really fun to see a quarterback who's kind of like, all right, I trust you all. We're going to run this and we're going to hit it eventually. Because maybe next time now he knows exactly where to put the ball. The receivers know exactly where to be and what the timing is when it worked. So that was fun to see as well, but it was definitely incredibly frustrating. I think, Jaden Reed pretty much dropped a touchdown through his hands in the end zone that we were in. So you want to see those things cleaned up for sure. But he's spreading the ball around.
Yeah, he really is, and everybody's getting involved. And I think you kind of have to when you're without Aaron Jones and Christian Watson. So really curious to see what the offense kind of continues to evolve into. Really fun, of course, like you mentioned already, to see Keyshawn Nixon get in there on offense. We know what Matt LaFleur is, right? And we know he loves to put creative things on tape. So I'm sure there's a lot that we saw in week 2 that he'll come back to in week 5, some things he did in week 3. He's giving us different looks. And when he has his full arsenal at his disposal, I'm curious to see what happens there, and really interested to see what the what the running back rotation looks like, because Patrick Taylor has already been elevated 3 times from the practice squad. Yeah. So, is there a conversation about adding him to the active roster? Do you kind of shuffle some things around? Because not on the ground, I think he had 2 attempts on the ground, but he had a couple, nice catches that I think sparked some things on offense. So somebody's got to start making some plays in the running back room. And we know Aaron Jones obviously will be doing that when he returns, but you also can't have him shouldering the entire load of the running back room, because as we've seen, if he's out a game or 2, the running back, there's no production there, and you can't run an NFL offense with 0 production from your running backs.
No, you can't. And you also can't expect Jordan Love to drop back to pass 44 times in every single game like he did in this game, right? Patrick Taylor had 3 catches for 23 yards. And I do agree with you. It did feel like his catch and run for the first down was kind of a little bit of like a spark. It was kind of the start to their getting rolling, and then finishing off the game with that amazing 18-point run. I also think, and we talk about this very often, is like, you can't put the entire load on Aaron Jones. Like, they have always had this running back rotation. Matt LaFleur has always wanted to bring in multiple different kinds of backs who can do different things. And so right now, if you do have Aaron Jones, you're very one-dimensional. Now you're an amazing one dimension because Aaron Jones is phenomenal. But at the same time, look at him. He tweaks his hamstring and he's out 2 games. Like, if he's doing a full workload, you have no idea what that's going to do to his body. He's never had to be that back, even though I think is fully capable of being that back. So something, I'm just kind of reiterating your point here, which is like something has to give. And at what point are you just like, sure, sign Patrick Taylor because, someone we have to, and we don't want to lose him and he's bringing some juice, or, give Emmanuel Wilson a few more rushing attempts. He only had 2 for 6 yards. Like, someone's going to have to get in there and start making some plays on the ground, especially for a team that, I mean, they're running their play action without a run game, which is very funny, but like eventually, like a team is not going to bite, right? Because you're not running the ball and you're going to have to start running the ball in order for like the rest of your offense to operate.
Yeah, that's all good points. And, we'll talk about it, of course, in more detail when we get to the Lions preview, but have not given up 100 yards on the grounds yet this season. So another big test, obviously, coming for the run game against possibly the best run defense that they've faced so far through 4 weeks. So let's flip it now. Let's talk about the defensive side of the ball, because you talked about it at the top of the show. Obviously, only allowed 10 points the whole game. Rashan Gary, give him his flowers. First 3-sack game of his career. First of many, it feels like at this point. He probably got better after tearing his ACL, which I'm not quite sure is possible when you look at anatomy. But yeah, really impressive performance from the defense to only give up 10 points.
Yeah. Also, not to be overstated, that Kenny Clark also had a sack. So there were 4 sacks on the day against the Saints. Yeah, it's so funny. Like, this defense can be so frustrating, and that you leave this game and you're like, they only gave up 10 points. Like, they really did such a good job clamping down on the Saints offense. Now, you can point to the fact that Derek Carr went out, sure, but their backup quarterback is a starter. Like, Jameis Winston is a starter on any other team. So while he's a very different guy, he can sling it against you, and I think they did a really, really nice job. Also, without 2 of their starting corner, then the guy who is replacing their starting corner goes out with an injury. So Corey Ballantyne's up on the practice squad, going up against like Chris Olave, who's a first-round wide receiver and like the best, their number 1, respectfully. So I'm just very impressed by this overall performance. I think it was like top down an amazing performance. I thought Darnell Savage played a really nice game. He's playing really aggressively. The front was getting after the Saints offensive line, which if you listen to our preview show, we said that that's going to be key because the Saints offensive line is at bottom of the league right now in pass block and pass rush win rate. I'm going to trip over my words again saying that. And they did it. They showed it that like that's their weakness. They were running all over them, and they did they were able to get to the quarterback and really kind of stifle any kind of rhythm, especially in the second half. I also just want to talk about, we watched them get gashed on the ground by Bijan Robinson, and I think we all were like, okay, is this the Packers of old rearing their ugly head, or is this just like that Bijan Robinson is really talented? And I'm leaning towards the latter, not based off this game, just like based off, Bijan Robinson is just really freaking talented, but they really stopped the run very well in this game. I think Kendre Miller, if I'm saying that right, got the most carries, 9 carries for 34 yards. Tony Jones Jr., 8 carries for 31 yards. And Taysom Hill, 4 carries for 12 yards. So it was an under 100 day on the ground for the Saints. And I think there wasn't really any like big major run that they allowed to like break open. It was just like an all around stout performance.
Yeah, something else that, going back kind of through, because we see all these things live, but you really don't get the full scope of the game until you're able to go look at the numbers and kind of see how everything shook out. And something I came away really impressed by, and you could feel it in the stadium, was the third down efficiency of the Saints. They were only 4 of 14 for a 28% success rate. And I think that was a real strength of this Packers defense. We've seen them struggle, to get off the field, especially against the Falcons. It felt like they were just constantly moving the chains like 4 yards at a time. And the Packers are really good at that on Sunday. They completely shut down the Saints, especially in the second half. And that was imperative to them winning. And, You mentioned Kenny Clark, Rashan Gary, that pressure really helped in those moments to get that Packers defense off the field, because we saw a lot of it in week 2, a game that we felt they should have won. They got gassed. And it was nice to see them kind of have the energy and bring the momentum in week 3, because that felt like it was missing last week.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to give it to the crowd, because I think a lot of times you hear about Lambeau not being really like this home field advantage anymore, and the crowd never gets into it. Like, the crowd got loud,
at least
on
in our
defense.
section. Our section was great.
No, but you could hear it too in like videos, and apparently like on the broadcast and things like that. It was very apparent, and like there's that like synergy, right, between fans and especially between the defense of the home team, where like they can really, I think, feed off of that. And, you know, you hear about like the Seahawks and the Chiefs and certain teams where like that home field advantage, it's almost like there's a 12th player right on the field with them. And it was fun to be a part of the crowd that got really, really loud on third down, and then have the Packers kind of like be successful there. So I hope in the future that everyone at Lambeau kind of keeps that rolling, because you can just feel it, right? Everyone on the sideline is like supportive. It's just like, it's a very interactive, if you will, experience. And I hope it's helpful. I mean, there were players that were saying like, you know, it was electric in here, and they certainly feed off of that. So I guess they needed it with the amount of injuries that they have, right? I didn't even mention that Devondre Campbell went out like somewhere in the second quarter with an ankle injury, never returned. So they're kind of on their like last dregs of the depth at this point. And turning around a short week is going to be tough. They're going to need to rally.
Yeah, absolutely. Also want to give, a quick mention to Rudy Ford. I thought he had a pretty nice game. I thought the safety tandem played well in general. Rudy Ford led the team in tackles with 7. Well, he tied Quay Walker for combined tackles with 7. But he also had 2 passes defense. And, it felt like those came at some pretty significant moments.
Yeah,
so
totally.
So far, for not really understanding who would be starting safeties throughout pretty much all of training camp, the safeties are kind of holding it down. So let's shift.
I guess the Packers kind of knew what they were doing then, because they didn't really make any moves, and here we are. I do want to talk about Quay Walker really quick.
Okay.
Because I think through 3 games, he has really shined. I just feel like he's been all over the place, making tackles everywhere. He's always in on like key stops, and if a guy misses a tackle, you hear it's number 7 who like finally gets the player down. So I do want to just give him a quick shout out. Maybe he's my really early stock up, because you look for guys to make that kind of like second year jump, and you talk about it all the time. And I think it historically hasn't been happening a ton with Packers players where you hope it does. And it looks like he has really like taken that leap.
Yeah, absolutely. So then let's segue to game balls. Maybe Quay is one of those for you, but who would get your game ball coming out of week 3?
I mean, it's Rashan, right? This guy tore his ACL less than a year ago. That he works so damn hard to get back. He puts 100% into everything that he does. And so to see him come in and wreck an opposing offense is amazing. It's exactly what you want. You worry when a player has such a significant injury, like whether they're going to come back the same player. And you said it, he's like almost better. But also like he's on a snap count still. Like he's playing like 30% of defensive snaps, like maybe less than that. And they're slowly increasing it. So I can only imagine what kind of wreckage he's going to do for the rest of the season. But he just looks the part. And when the Packers lost him last season, their pass rush was it was nothing without him. And you can see again, like why he's just, I don't know. I don't have a word anymore for him. He's just an athletic freak.
All right. My game ball is going to go to kicker Anders Carlson. I'm knocking on wood. I don't know if you can see me doing this. My wood paneling in my basement. We're knocking on wood because right now Carlson has a 100% success rate, field goals, and extra points. We talked about it on the show. We talked about it on Packers'at. We talked about it on Twitter. We talked about it everywhere that he struggled in training camp and he struggled in the preseason. And what would this amount to in the regular season? Would they need to call up old friend Mason Crosby? Would they need to look elsewhere? No, he's killing it. For a rookie to come in and have a 100% success rate through 3 weeks and some big time moments and some big time kicks, he gets a game ball for that because that is incredibly impressive.
Yeah. I mean, we saw a kicker not succeed right in this game. Ultimately was the reason why the Packers won, because the Saints kicker, missed wide right. So yeah, I think Lambeau is also a historically like pretty hard place to kick. So if he can do it in Lambeau, he can do it anywhere.
Absolutely. So who gets your stock up then for the week, or did you kind of already tease that one?
I think it's Quay. I just really like the trajectory that he's on. I like what he brings to the middle of the field. I like the energy. I would love to see him used a little bit more creatively, although with injuries, I imagine like they're really going to need him to be like the linebacker now. He's wearing the dot, right? He's from Joe Barry to Quay to the rest of the defense. He's the communicator, which is huge. So, and so far, actually, now that I say this out loud, I think the communication between the defense has been really nice. I mean,
Yeah.
granted, they haven't been perfect, but it has not nearly been the same as last season where you're like, are you guys talking to each other? So whatever they're doing with Quay and his level of to like share Joe Barry's plan to the team on the field, it's going well.
I agree. The stock up on the offensive side of the ball feels a little bit easy this week, so I'm going to also talk about the defense just a little bit, and I'm going to split mine with Rudy Ford and Darnell Savage. We obviously talked about them a little bit already, but I just think our expectations for the season for the safety unit were pretty low, and through 3 weeks, I think that Ford and Savage have performed really well. Savage had an incredible special teams tackle. He brings the juice. Matt LaFleur has given him shout outs in week 1 and week 3 now post game, talking about how Darnell is always the guy on the sideline coming up to him and saying, Coach, we got you. And I think that's so impressive for somebody that was in his position last year, who got benched, who didn't get to start for some of the season, to come in and say, hey, regardless of the situation, we've got it covered. So really impressive leadership out of him. So he absolutely would get my stock up this week.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's a guy that you're like, we're rooting for you.
Right.
This is a really important year and we need a starting safety and we don't want you to be bad. Like the Packers picked up his 5th-year option and you might as well hope that they get the most out of him. And I think so far he has completely exceeded my expectations. I mean, you saw flashes, right? In the early seasons when they drafted him, you could see the athleticism and the way that he can fly around when he plays close to the ball. And then last year, maybe it was just like, you hit rock bottom and there's only up to go kind of situation for him. But I like the way he's playing a lot.
Absolutely. Then who gets your stock down? Because I feel bad having the same stock down every single week, but it feels like we know where the stock down is going.
Well, I have a different one actually.
Okay.
So my stock down is like the bottom half of the wide receiver room. I think we went into this season being like, look at all this young talent and oh, it's so exciting, and like Samori Toure and look the breakout star and Malik Heath. And I think it's becoming a little bit clear like who the actual starting wide receivers are and should be and who the depth guys are. And that's important, right? It's important to know kind of where everybody stands. And I mentioned it earlier where like Christian Watson's going to come back and it's going to take snaps away from some guys, rightfully so. But I think it's like very clear that Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, and Dontavian Wicks are like the guys at the moment. And there's a pretty large differential between them and the rest of the wide receiver room. And again, like very impressive. That's 2 rookies. One of them is a 5th-round pick, and the other is a second-year receiver. Like they've really done, I think, a phenomenal job in terms of like probably partly scheme and Matt LaFleur calling things to get them open and putting them in positions to win. But like I watched Doubs and Wicks off the line, and like they just seem leaps and bounds ahead of where you would think that they would be at this point in their career. And I think Jaden Reed has so much skill to him, and the speed that he brings to this offense is just like nothing that they've had in a very long time. His hands need to get a little bit better, but again, like that's something that you can learn. So I'm stocked down on some of the, I don't call them bottom tier, but depth wide receivers.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I guess my stock down would go to punt coverage.
Yes, there we go.
I mean, I think it's fair to question, like, I think Rich Bisaccia is a very fiery coach. I think I would probably run through a brick wall if he told me to. Like, I appreciate hearing him in pressers and I like listening to him, and I think he has a lot of buy-in from his guys, like Keyshawn Nixon. He joked about how Nixon had to go study the offense on his own time because he's one of his core guys. Like, that's where he belongs, is on special teams. But something's got to give, right? If you're talking about being the bottom of the league in special teams for so long, you can't have those kind of big momentum shifting moments in a game, especially when you have a young quarterback.
Right.
So they were able to overcome that, obviously, and pull out a win. But let's work on our punt coverage, guys. That'll be my stock down for this week.
I was waiting for when we were going to talk about that, because you're right. I mean, like, in this game, the defense held up. They were able to keep them from scoring any points in the second half, but you're going to play better teams than this. You're going to play better quarterbacks. You're going to play better wide receiver cores. And like, that's not going to be the case. And if you get a punt return like this for a touchdown, like that's game with some other teams that you're playing. So they just got very lucky. I think that it didn't end up being this like huge momentum swinger.
Yep. So lastly, then let's talk about our favorite plays of the game. What got you out of your seat at Lambeau Field, Perri?
Well, you would know.
Well, I know, obviously.
You saw. Oh gosh. I think Jordan running it in for the touchdown is probably up there. That's his first touchdown at Lambeau. Like I said before, I mean, he really put the team on his back in a way that we have not had to see him do so far this season. Obviously, it's week 3, nor do I think that anyone would have expected him to yet. We talked about this like in our Falcons recap show, right? Like, he had his opportunity, but like, my God, like all the pressure. And then here he is leading like one of the greatest comebacks in the franchise's history. And we're like, okay, well, he can do it. And I loved him just kind of like using his legs in a way we haven't seen in a while from Packers quarterback, scheming things up. Demario Davis is no slouch.
He's an all-pro.
Yeah, like that. Like, he juked Demario Davis. Like the touchdown to Romeo Doubs, I'm not going to discredit. It was a gorgeous ball. It was perfectly placed, but they were picking on Isaac Yiadom for obvious reasons. Like, you juked Demario Davis. This is like a very different level of skill. So just amazing play. But I think also the 2-point conversion is also probably up there in just like a bundle, because that play, I'm going to talk about JT O'Sullivan, I think, every week, but I watched his recap of this game for Jordan Love, and I'm not sure I realized initially that the play totally broke down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, their original read wasn't there. And Love really improvised and like had to just find someone who was open. And again, we talk about his poise and his calmness and his demeanor, and it just keeps showing up week after week. And especially in like really key moments like this, where that 2-point conversion is everything, right? That's how they won, was that very smart decision by Matt LaFleur to go for 2 there. And he totally had to improvise in order to convert it. So just like overall impressed with his fourth quarter.
Yeah, I agree. And it was cool to hear like Samori Toure talk about it after the game and just say, like, we know that Jordan Love likes to go off script. So if things break down, to not get frazzled and to like find an opening and sit in it. So I think that's really impressive too, to know that you have he's got 4 starts to his career. Like, to be that young and to be that poised and to have that kind of mindset is really impressive. I think my favorite play, it would have been the Jordan Love, the touchdown, but I also think, they got the biggest reaction from the fans was definitely the Jaden Reed 30-yarder, where he like laid out and it was just a perfect ball, especially after, a couple of like, drops, just inconsistencies, to come up in such a huge moment on the sideline.
It was a 3rd down too, right?
3rd or 2nd, but
it was a key down. It was
So I think that would have been the moment, was just, it's always fun, right? When you're at Lambeau and everybody just at once, like a sea gets out of their seats to like see what happened. And that was definitely one of those moments where like all of the energy could just feel inside of the stadium. So any final thoughts then before we wrap this thing up and then kick off our Lions preview?
Yeah. Again, I mean, this was not the greatest day from Jordan Love, but I still think I'm not super concerned. He'll get on the same page with Luke Musgrave. I do think that was a little bit of a layup and he should hit, but there's others that he'll watch the tape and he'll fix it. And I just think everything that he's shown us so far should leave us all feeling very, very confident that he can go out and win a lot of games. And you just love hearing from his guy. Like every single guy in that locker room would like go to war with him, which I think says a lot for a first year starter. So I love the trajectory that we're on. I think I'm going back to like what you and I talked about a lot this offseason, which is like they need to get progressively better. And like step by step, you can see like the building blocks of it happen. And they're going to go up against a really, really big challenge. They're home, but it's a short week. They're very injured. And this Lions team is very good. So, next step in their overcoming adversity this Thursday.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's kind of where I wanted to wrap this is we have talked about it ad nauseum on this show, the idea that Matt LaFleur's teams get punched in the mouth and they don't know how to respond. You can't respond better than not scoring any points for 3 quarters and then rallying to an 18-point comeback and winning a game in the 4th quarter with the quarterback making his 4th official start. Like, you just can't. So all the narratives about Matt LaFleur, all the talk about this team not having juice, I don't know. We don't need to care about what those other locker rooms felt like. This locker room feels special. And this could be a team that is 7-10 and still feels special. And I think that's important because this team can be special for a number of seasons because they have the pieces to do that. They're young. They're all on long contracts. There's really nobody that's like a key piece, assuming they extend Rashan Gary, that won't be around, right? So this is a really young core nucleus. So to be able to overcome adversity in moments like this, it just shows you what this team is made of. And I think it's really exciting long term, however the season shakes out, to know that, this is something special that they're building over at 1265.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
Cool. Well, let's wrap this up. I was gonna wave my my rally towel around, but I didn't get a chance to do it in the beginning of the show. So really exciting comeback. Grateful to be there. Grateful to have obviously gone to the game with you. Thank you as always for listening to the show. You can find us on YouTube. You can also find us everywhere you get your favorite podcasts at PWSS Podcast on Twitter. And find Perri on Twitter at Perri_Goldstein. Find me on Twitter at Maggie J. Loney. We will be back very shortly with a Lions preview because it is a short week. But thank you as always for listening to the show. Please download it if you can because it helps out our listening numbers. Follow the show on YouTube if you don't already. And go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.